You could keep your audio on mute unless you're speaking, asking questions. We will use the chat and we'll function and we'll be monitoring that. So you can always ask questions anytime on the chat. I'm Mike Whirling, a technical specialist agronomist with the SWCD. I am a conservation advocate and I practice restorative agriculture. Today we have Art Franke, a NRCS District Conservationist from Steuben County, Indiana, and Heath Hurst, a resource specialist, Indiana State Department of Agriculture, Northeast Indiana. I think let's just start right in with Art. You want to take it?
All right. Well, thank you very much, Mike. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah, you're coming through real good.
Okay, we'll go ahead and get started then. I'm going to cover the weed science part of the plant science discussion. So I'll go ahead and load my presentation here. And let me know if you can see that.
Yes, looks good.
Okay.
We are looking at the notes in the next slide right now.
Okay. Let me see if I can fix that.
We're back to you.
Okay, I think there's a button here that will let me.
It's back up, but the notes are there, so that's not. There you go. You got it.
What was that? Okay. All right. As Mike said, I'm Art Franke. I'm the NRCS District Conservationist for Steuben County, Indiana, up in Angola. I've been there officially since 2019. I worked for NRCS for several years in the Allen County office, in the Albion Tech team, as an acting district conservationist down south in Jasper, Indiana, and now Angola, Indiana. I grew up in LaGrange County, right next door to Steuben. Went to Purdue University for sustainable agronomy systems was my major, studying plant and soil science. In college, during the summers, for a couple of summers, worked for Pioneer Hybrids doing detasseling seed corn work. Did one summer with Leonard Ag Company doing crop scouting for weeds and irrigation management on potatoes. Summer of 2015, I worked for NRCS as an intern up in northern Michigan in the Upper Peninsula, which was quite a bit different experience. Involved a lot of forestry. Up there, their growing seasons are short enough that there's not a lot of, what we would consider commercial agriculture. It's a lot of pasture, small livestock farms, things like that. So I've got to see a lot of different diversity in agriculture in my years with NRCS so far. So I'm going to focus on weeds today. We're going to talk about what is a weed, basic plant biology, common weeds of Indiana in various settings, row crops, small gardens and vegetable operations, pastures and hay, and forestry and wildlife habitat, weedy species, and then we'll open it up for discussion and talk about some of this. So I'll go ahead and get started with weed biology. What a weed is. There is no good botanical or scientific definition of what a weed is. Basically, a weed is any plant growing where people do not want it. Any species of plant can be a weed. A volunteer corn plant in a soybean field is a weed. A red root pigweed growing in your garden is a weed. Dandelion in your yard may be considered a weed. A hardwood tree growing in a southern pine plantation that they're trying to grow for lumber, that would be considered a weed. So basically it's a plant that has vigorous growth. It's not wanted where it is. It's competing with or taking up space in a crop field or an area that you don't want it growing. So it's, a weed is a very open-ended thing. And as you see in the next couple of slides, we're going to talk about why we don't necessarily want weeds around. So all plants need sunlight, water, nutrients, growing space, and growing a crop, you want to maximize the amount of those things that your crop is getting. And if you have a weed competing with your crop, it's obviously going to be taking sunlight, water, nutrients, and growing space away from those desirable plants that you were trying to grow. Those effects can be simply biological, the weed physically competing right beside your crop. It can be economical. That weed taking away sunlight from a corn or soybean plant or a carrot plant in your garden can be taking yield away from you. So that translates to dollars lost. Here's a study from Purdue. 2 ragweed plants per 110 square feet in a field can reduce corn yield by up to 13%. Now, that may not sound like a lot, but you multiply that over an acre, over hundreds of acres, that's a lot of corn yield lost, a lot of bushels, a lot of money. It really adds up. Giant ragweed, even more competitive than soybeans. When ragweed is allowed to emerge and grow along the crop, interfere with soybeans for at least 4 weeks, yields can be reduced up to more than 25% if weather conditions are unfavorable for crop development. So that's, some of those numbers may not sound like much, but you multiply that over the size of a field, the size of a farming operation, it really adds up. Weeds are probably one of the things producers worry about the most, trying to keep your fields clean so that your crops can have the best chance to yield well. So before we get into talking about specific weeds in Indiana, we should probably understand weeds' life cycles. There are annual plants, a plant that completes its life cycle within a year or growing season. It's going to sprout from a seed. It's going to grow over a season. It's going to flower and set seed. And at the end of the season, it's going to die. And it's going to continue on the next generation with those seeds that are going to get into the soil and germinate the next year. Some examples are pigweed, amaranth species, are summer annuals, meaning they grow early in the summer. They may germinate, grow alongside a crop. They may set seed in the summer or fall, and then they're going to die off when frost happens, and they're going to repeat that year over year. Mare's tail, for example, is a winter annual. Can germinate in the fall, over winter as a rosette stage, and that next year it's going to bolt, set seed, and repeat. Biennials are the next kind of plant life cycle. We don't see as many of these, but there are some plant species around that function as biennial. The most common example would be the common garden radish. It's going to grow a taproot. That taproots may or may not survive over the winter. If it does, it's going to bolt, it's going to flower, it's going to set seed. So these plants take 2 years to accomplish their life cycle. Wild mustard, sweet clover, wild radish are some of the weedy examples that you may find in Indiana that follow this kind of biennial growth pattern. There are a lot of wild thistles also that are biennials. Perennials are some of the more problematic weeds because they have multiple ways to reproduce and grow. They're going to live over multiple years. They are going to flower and set seed, probably not their first year, but maybe in the second or third. And their root systems are also going to live over the winter. A lot of perennial weeds have rhizomes or spreading root systems. So even if the plant is mowed off or killed above ground, it can still come back. things like Canada thistle, Johnson grass, dandelions, wild grapevine. Perennials can also be woody or herbaceous. So at this point, we're going to go talk about a couple examples of each that you may find in Indiana. This first one being common lamb's quarters, very common weed. It has goosefoot shaped leaves. The unique characteristic of this weed is that it has sort of white, sort of powdery covering on some of the leaves that can be rubbed off. That can help you identify it. You're going to find this in tilled areas, crop ground, or recently disturbed areas, and it is an annual, so its root systems will not live over the winter time. Red root pigweed is its cousin. They're in the same family. It's called red root because it has a red root, and pigweed, I guess, because pigs probably would feed on it. This is also a problematic weed in row crops. It's a summer annual. It's going to germinate early in the season. It's going to grow during the hot months of the year, and it's going to set seed in the late summer or fall. And it is not going to survive the winter, but its seeds are. And then its big bad cousin, Palmer amaranth, becoming more and more of a problem in Indiana because of its herbicide resistance qualities. It is also a summer annual. Can become a huge plant, 5-6 feet tall or more. Each plant can set millions of seeds, and it is a pretty aggressive, pretty vigorous plant. This is bad news if you've got it in your field or on your farm. You're probably going to want to try different herbicides to get rid of it. If you've got them growing in your field, you're probably going to want to walk the rows, cut them out, because you do not want this going to seed on your farm. So now we'll go into a couple biennials. Poison hemlock is one I forgot to mention earlier. It's a common biennial in Indiana, and this is deadly poison. If livestock eat it, it can cause serious illness or death. Same for people. Even touching the foliage of this plant can cause skin reactions. And as far as I know, every part of the plant is poisonous. So this is a do not touch kind of plant. It's often confused with Queen Anne's lace or wild carrot, but this plant, the poison hemlock, has its characteristic is it has a lot of purple splotches on it. If you look real carefully there at some of the nodes on that stem in the picture, it's got purple on it. Hollow stems, purple, has sort of a foul odor if you cut it, mow it, or crush it. This is a pretty aggressive, nasty plant that you also don't want growing around. One redeeming characteristic of it, though, is it is pretty susceptible to any herbicides that I know of. So it's fairly easy to kill that way. But yeah, if you see this growing, I think it flowers in May. Usually this part of Indiana, it's going to have white flowers. It can also get pretty tall. You want to keep an eye out for this one. Wild radish is the wild cousin of garden radish. It grows a taproot that may or may not overwinter. It has yellow flowers. Typically, I don't see this a lot in Indiana. You do see it some in roadsides and farm field edges and things like that, but it's just a good example of a biennial. It takes 2 years to complete its life cycle. Here's a perennial weed that we're probably all familiar with, Canada thistle. It grows and spreads by flowers and fluffy seeds that spread in the wind, and it also has a very nasty spreading root system, as you can see in that bottom picture there. If you mow Canada thistle off, it's just going to keep on growing. It has an amazing underground biomass root system that it can pull energy from and spread and keep growing. Canada thistle is also a Indiana prohibited noxious weed, which means it is technically illegal to allow it to grow on your property. You are supposed to kill it. It's a problem not so much in row crops because it's pretty susceptible to herbicide, especially a field that's getting tilled or sprayed every year. That tends to rip its root system up and keep it at bay. But it's more of a problem in pasture and hay areas, roadsides, waste areas, is where it's most problematic. Johnson grass is another prohibited Indiana noxious weed. Not so much a problem in northern Indiana, though we do see it some. It is a C4 warm season grass, which means it grows very vigorously during the warm summer months. It also spreads by seeds and by underground rhizomes. I believe it was originally brought to Indiana because it is pretty palatable to livestock, and it was used as a forage species, but it has escaped, obviously, and is pretty aggressive, pretty invasive. It's another one you don't find in row crops as much because it's, as far as I know, susceptible to most herbicides, but you can find it in pastures, waste areas, open sunny areas where it really spreads and crowds other things out. And so now that's just an example of some of the weeds we're going to find in Indiana, and we'll go through more later. But at this point, I think it's good to talk about all the weed control options that a landowner or a farmer has to manage weeds. And some of these are, pretty obvious. Tillage, been used for thousands of years to control weeds in farming. Herbicides are a relatively new invention that are effective on most weeds, but we'll talk about some of the pros and cons of herbicides on a later slide. Mulching can be as simple as laying straw or wood mulch or whatever, or leaves or whatever material you have available down to control the weeds around your crop. Keep them seeds from germinating and making it through the mulch. And then we'll talk about cultural methods, which are basically management methods of keeping weeds at bay, using complex crop rotations, using cover crops, which Heath is going to get into later, managing plant spacing or plant population, row spacing on your row crops to try to crowd the weeds out and not give them a chance to grow. And then we'll go into some alternative methods that are also used to control weeds. So first, tillage is an obvious way to kill weeds with steel, basically. In the picture there is a moldboard plow, flipping plant residue from last year over. It looks like a cornfield, exposing the soil. In doing that, you're burying weed seed, but you also may be bringing some up to the surface. And the other obvious downside of tillage is its impact on soil structure, soil biology, and its tendency to cause erosion if you have unprotected tilled soil on a slope of any kind. So tillage is a powerful tool, but it also has its major drawbacks in weed control. Herbicides are a very powerful tool to control weeds, obviously, but they also have their drawbacks. Using one kind of herbicide or mode of action group over and over again, like we have seen done in the past with Roundup, glyphosate, can lead to herbicide-resistant weeds over time, that those weeds are simply no longer or minimally affected by that herbicide. Also, over application, not following herbicide labels, not making the concentration strong enough, can also lead to that herbicide resistance in weed populations. And there's also growing concern about herbicide contamination of the environment, of groundwater, surface water. How does it affect people or animals that may drink water that has a couple millionths of a parts per million of a herbicide in it? Is that toxic over time? Is that a problem? Is that a health problem? That's something else we need to worry about when using herbicides. I thought this was interesting, this warning when I was doing some research on the Clemson University's Weed Management Extension website. Says herbicides with the active ingredient glyphosate, a couple others, paraquat, caprylic acid, should under no circumstances be applied to crops, intentionally or otherwise, as they are non-selective herbicides. The only exemption are transgenic crops with specific resistance to one or more of these active ingredients. Since the 90s, I believe we now have genetically modified crops that resist certain herbicides. The most famous one probably being Roundup Ready, beans. These are soybeans which have a gene put into them so that Roundup can be sprayed on the entire field and the soybeans are unaffected. Everything else, the idea being in that field would be killed, so you have a clean, weed-free soybean field, and that worked for a while. Over time, weeds that may have survived the initial glyphosate application. They're, through time, have passed down genetics that allow some weeds to be resistant to Roundup or not affected by it as much. And that is becoming a problem with not only glyphosate, but other herbicide groups. And that is, I would say, one of the major concerns in agriculture today is if we're promoting soil health and no-till and all these practices, and we've got herbicide resistance that weeds are resistant to herbicides that we're using, and that may, farmers may have to resort to other means such as tillage, which seems like a step backwards. But we'll talk more about that later, because that is a major problem, herbicide resistance in weed populations. Here's a couple of the herbicide groups, mode of action groups, and this can be very confusing. This could be its own hours-long presentation about herbicides. There are chemical mode of action groups, and that is physically or chemically what the herbicide does to the plant. For example, I believe Roundup glyphosate is a group 9. It prohibits the formation of, I think, specific proteins in the plant that keep it from growing. Group 4 is a growth regulator. I think that's a synthetic growth hormone that actually causes plants to have runaway growth, sort of like a cancer. And certain species of plants are not affected by that herbicide, and certain species are. So, I mean, take a look at this chart, and if we have questions or discussion about it at the end, we'll take it up then. But this could be its own hours-long discussion, because if you're truly managing your herbicides, using your herbicides on label and trying to fight weed resistance, you're going to need to find multiple mode of action groups to use in a rotation to wipe the weeds out, keep your crops weed free, but also weed resistance in its tracks. So we'll talk more about herbicides at the end, I guess. Mulching, pretty simple concept. Sometimes not easy to do. I think this is strawberries pictured. Strawberries name actually coming from the practice of putting straw over them in the wintertime to keep the ground a little warmer and keep weeds from competing. This is basically just putting a barrier down to keep weed seeds from germinating, to keep weed seeds that are germinating from maybe making it up to the sunlight. It's effective, but it's hard to do on a large scale. So this is more for small gardens, vegetable growers that maybe are not only working with a couple acres. But there's been a lot of movement recently with cover crops and knocking those down, mulching those. That could also be considered a form of weed control and mulching. And Heath will probably get into that more later. With cover crop rolling and crimping. Cultural methods for weed control. Crop rotation in farm fields can be an effective tool to fight weed populations. The weeds that tend to grow alongside a crop tend to be weeds that are similar to that crop. For example, corn, you may have more trouble with grassy, weedy species in a corn crop than you would in a soybean crop. Same with wheat, which is what is pictured here. The problematic weeds in a winter wheat crop tend to be winter annuals. Plants that are going to grow alongside that wheat, compete with it the entire time that it's growing. So rotating between crops, doing corn, soybeans, and wheat, and cover crops, and maybe adding something else to your crop rotation can be an effective tool to basically break the life cycle of some of these weeds and crowd them out. Cover crops are another cultural method. It's becoming more and more popular to fight off weeds. A lot of people are having luck with overwintering grain cover crops like cereal rye. It helps to outcompete that winter annual mare's tail that is becoming such a problem. Other cultural weed control methods are adjusting your plant population, your row spacing, things like that may give the crop a better chance to outcompete the weeds physically, to keep them in the shade, because once those weeds get above the crop, it's sort of game over. The weed is going to be so vigorous, it's going to be hogging up all the sunlight and water at that point. You really want to keep the weeds under control when they're small. And that should have been something I mentioned with herbicides. If you read most herbicide labels, they are tested to be sprayed on label when the weeds are small, usually a couple inches high at most. If you've got a giant ragweed plant out there that's already 5 feet tall, yeah, an herbicide may kill it, but you're going to need a lot more of it. You're going to have to douse the leaves, and it's a lot easier to do when that plant is just a couple inches tall. So, but yeah, cultural methods, basically anything you can do to keep the weeds at bay. If you've got, like we mentioned earlier, Palmer amaranth in your field and herbicides did not knock it out, it's probably a good idea to go in there with a hoe or a machete and get rid of those, because you don't want them setting seed, that seed getting established in your soil for next year. That would also be an example of a cultural method for weed control. And there's alternative methods. Some of these sound quite fun. You can literally get flamethrowers to flame weeds, kill them with fire. That's an extreme example. I don't know if I've seen this done in person, but the way to do it is out there. Some alternative control methods that also come to mind are what we mentioned with the cultural control methods: physically hand weeding or removing problematic weeds, mulching, things like that. There's no set way to kill weeds. There's all kinds of options available, and the sky's the limit, basically. So maybe we'll hear more about this in the discussion. People have ideas or alternative methods that they have worked with to control weeds. Weed ecology. So far we've pretty much been bashing on weeds. Weeds are bad, weeds are terrible, you don't want them around. But why are weeds, species that tend to be weeds, the way they are? Weeds are typically ruderal species, meaning that they thrive in a recently disturbed or early successional environment. In nature, weeds are going to come in after some kind of disaster, a tornado, a mountain avalanche, a wildfire, and they're going to start growing quickly because where there is bare soil, there is major potential of further environmental degradation by rain, by ice. Those ruderal species are going to have rapid root development and growth. They're going to help stabilize areas that have been subject to mass disturbance. And in some cases, I see this, in fields around here. You've got weeds that may be considered beneficial when they're not directly competing with desired plants or crops. An example I'll give is this time of year, if you're driving around and you see a corn or soybean field that is sort of purplish in color, it's probably got a lot of henbit or purple dead nettle in it. I don't see those weeds typically as a major competitor with the crops. They may be more of an issue in a winter wheat crop because they're growing at the same time as that winter wheat over the winter. But if those weeds are growing in between a corn or soybean crop over the winter, they've got living roots in the ground, you basically have a free cover crop at that point. And an herbicide or a burn down pass is just going to wipe those out. You're going to have a clean field to start for your corn or soybeans. Now I have heard one of those species, I believe, I forget which one, may be a host for soybean nematodes maybe. So in that case, maybe it's not so beneficial, but if you're not seeing a yield hit or a problem with it, there's in that case, the weed may be not considered a problem. Same thing with dandelions or clover in your yard. Some people that are really into yard management may not like that, but I've talked to lots of beekeepers. Their favorite thing in the spring is seeing the dandelions come out, the white clover come out a little later in the spring, because that is nectar and forage for honeybees. It's one of the first things to flower in the spring, and that's when the bees are starting to get active and they need sustenance at that point. So in that case, those species that one person may be considered to be a weed, another person may consider it not to be a weed. So at this point, we'll go into some common weeds you find in Indiana. I'll buzz through these real quick, and then we can have discussion at the end. Row crop weeds in Indiana that you're going to commonly see: velvet leaf, amaranth species, which we went over before, red root pigweed, water hemp, Palmer amaranth. The best way to tell those apart, if you're worried that you may have Palmer in your field, pick a leaf with its petiole, that's the stalk that goes to the main stem, off the plant. And if the petiole is longer than the leaf itself, so if you bend the leaf back and it does not touch the stem, you might be dealing with Palmer amaranth, and you should probably get that checked out. Red root pigweed's typically going to have the leaves are going to be longer than the petiole. And water hemp is similar to Palmer amaranth, but if you consult a weed guide, just make sure you are dealing with what you think you are. Giant ragweed has three-pronged, big leaves, can be a huge plant if you give it a chance. 10, 12 feet tall is not out of line. It can tower over corn or soybean plants. Definitely a problem because that plant also has herbicide resistance to some herbicide groups. Cocklebur, mare's tail, foxtail grasses are also common weeds that you may see in corn or soybeans or wheat in Indiana. Gardens, vegetable gardens, and landscaping. These are some weeds you may see in those instances. Purslane has those purplish stems that creeps along the ground. Was actually introduced to the area, I think, because it is used as an herb or food plant. You can pick the entire plant, boil it, and it, I guess, tastes like greens from beets or something. I don't know if I've tried that, but I would, I guess, give it a chance. Hairy galling soga is a problematic weed. I see it in my own garden at home. It spreads all over, has little tiny white flowers on it. I've even seen it climbing up the sides of sweet corn. Wild morning glory is problematic because it's vining. It will climb up anything basically and just sort of stunt it. You don't want wild morning glories in your landscaping or in your climbing up your vegetable plants in your garden. Dandelions, I touched on briefly before. Long taproot, hard to dig out. Pretty little yellow flowers though. Bees love it. You may not love it in your yard. That is also common in gardens and landscaping, and same with knotweed. It tends to grow in compacted areas, travel lanes. So it's a common weed also. Pasture and hay weeds, a lot of these have a quality to them that you don't want your livestock eating. Canada thistle, obviously, because it has thistles on it. If somebody sees a load of hay and there's Canada thistle in it, its value just dropped. Jimson weed you don't want around. It is poisonous. You especially don't want that in hay because cutting the plant with hay, letting it dry, I think actually increases the toxicity of an animal eating that plant. Common ragweed is not necessarily poisonous. Livestock will eat it. It's just not very good forage. If you've got common ragweed growing, it probably means you're overgrazed in an area, in a pasture, or if it's in a hay field, it's maybe time to think about interseeding or starting over with that hay planting, because ragweed is out competing your alfalfa or your clover or grass or whatever you have growing. Curly dock is a common weed I see in pastures sometimes, especially along the edges. It's got big, tough leaves that aren't very palatable to livestock. And the same thing with burdock. It has those sticky burrs, sort of like Velcro, that are going to stick to anything and stick to animals, stick to you if you walk through the field or your clothes. And it's also got big, tough leaves that no animal, if it has better things to eat, it's not gonna mess with that. So those are 5 plants you probably want to keep out of your hay or pasture field if you can. Common weeds in Indiana forests. A lot of these are understory introduced invasive brush that compete with young hardwood saplings that are trying to get established. And there's also been research done that shows how much moisture and nutrients these species can take from even mature trees that may be 100 feet tall. These species can still have an effect on your timber stand, can really slow the growth down of some of your valuable oaks or walnuts that you may be looking to harvest at some point in the future and make quite a bit of money on. Kudzu, I've got starred there. That's if you're not familiar with it, look it up. It's the vine that ate the South. It will climb up anything. It'll bring trees down. It'll bring buildings down eventually. It's not really a problem in Indiana so much because of our colder winters. It's more of a problem down south, but it is found, I believe, now in some spots in southern Indiana. And that was introduced as a erosion control project plant, I think, back in the 1930s. So it was good intentions gone bad. It did its job as erosion control, but it did a lot more damage environmentally and economically. So that's the case with, I think every plant on this list is invasive. It's not from this area. It's from another part of the world, and they are starting to cause problems in a lot of our forests. Same thing with wildlife habitat, open areas, prairie grass, CRP areas. You may see some of these weeds. Common cutleaf teasel can be a massive plant, 6 feet tall easily, has spines all over it. It's invasive. If you can keep it off your property, do so, because it will spread like crazy. Reed canary grass is a wetland species. You're going to find on wet field edges, pothole wetlands and fields. It forms a turf. It grows very tall. It puts out a lot of pollen, usually in June or so, which if you have allergies, you don't want this plant around. Reed canary grass is not a good weed to have either. Calorie pear, those pretty white trees flowering right now outside that you may see around in landscaping, they are probably calorie pear. It spreads by little fruits, it spreads by root systems, quickly becoming an invasive problem in Indiana, displacing native trees, displacing native vegetation, and it's a bad one. Poison hemlock we touched on before. You're going to find it in waste areas or field edges. It's not a plant you want to mess around with. It's deadly poison. Canada goldenrod is a native plant. However, it tends to form monoculture stands, which means it's the only thing that grows. It's very competitive. Has pretty yellow flowers in the fall that bees do like, but at the expense of crowding everything else out. And it's allelopathic, which means it produces some kind of biochemical substance that allows that plant to outcompete the plants around it. And it is considered aggressive because it's native to this area, but it's not invasive because it's not from outside of this area. So at this point, I guess we'll open it up to discussion. If anybody has questions, wants to touch on a point that I talked about in the presentation, or wants me to pull a slide back up to talk about it, I'd be happy to. So I guess I'll send it back to you, Mike, for questions.
Yes, thank you, Art. Very good. What questions do you have? We have a pretty good amount of people joining us today, so give us your questions. I have one of them on the chat room. What rotations would you recommend in a garden situation to fight against weeds, or where could we go find the answer?
Okay, I'll try to touch on that, and if anybody has more gardening experience than I do, feel free to jump in too. In a garden, it's a little more tricky because you've got a lot of different species. You may have radishes, you may have peas, you may have sweet corn, potatoes, tomatoes. How I do it in my personal garden at home is every year I try to put a different garden plant in an area that was not there the year before. So where I had potatoes the year before, I may put sweet corn, or I may put green beans. That's purely mostly for a pest control. Taking potatoes for an example, those orange potato beetles can be pretty problematic, chew a lot of vegetation off your potatoes. If you put green beans in that area, the next year, those potato beetles are not going to have anything to feed on. And hopefully that's going to keep that population at bay. I know and this could be another probably hours-long discussion about companion crops and plants that grow well together, plants that don't grow well together. That's something to definitely look into also if you're gardening. People will use things like marigolds or zinnias to try to bring beneficial pollinating insects to your garden. That's something to consider. I try to keep plants that are in the same family, like tomatoes and potatoes, away from each other, strictly for the pest control issue. That's another thing to consider. So, and then I see a question on here about vinegars, surfactants. That's an organic way of controlling weeds. That's one thing I should have brought up on the alternative weed control method slide is, a strong vinegar will burn and kill weeds above ground. So if you're an organic operation or a small operation and you don't want to mess with herbicides, that's a good option. I don't know a lot about using the surfactants with the vinegar, but if anybody else wants to chime in on that, I would say go for it.
Marissa, would you like to unmute and expound or expand on that question?
Yeah, I sometimes use the 20% vinegar that I get from Amazon or the Ag Co-op in New Haven. If it doesn't have a surfactant in it, oftentimes I'll just add a little bit of dish soap to help it stick, and that seems to work pretty well. I don't dilute it. I know there's some recipes out there for dilution, but I've found that that doesn't seem to work as well. And like you were saying with some of the herbicides earlier for smaller things, I don't think it works great for I haven't had it work particularly well for thistle. Even dandelions, it may injure them, but it doesn't necessarily kill them. So some of that deeper rooted stuff can be a little bit more problematic trying to get rid of.
Very good, thank you. Any other questions? You're welcome to unmute and give them to us. You made me think about more edible plants, edible weeds, Art. I remember picking dandelions as a child for dandelion wine.
Yes.
My aunt would send us out in the yard in the fields to see how many we could pick.
Mm-hmm.
And if I remember right, lamb's quarter, wasn't that a food for the pioneers?
Yes, I think all of the amaranth species are the leaves, if they're young, can be boiled and also made into an edible green. I think there's a concern with if you have high nitrate levels in your soil, eating those greens. But yeah, lamb's quarter, young lamb's quarter leaves are edible. Same with purslane. I think all the parts of a dandelion plant are edible. Dandelion and chicory roots, I know, can be dug up, ground up, and turned into sort of a coffee substance. I've actually tried that. It's sort of bitter, but I like bitter coffee. So yeah, there's a lot of research to do in that area also, edible plants. But again, if you're not experienced in it, make sure you know what you're doing, because like I talked about with poison hemlock and Queen Anne's lace, they're sort of similar looking plants. One is edible, one is deadly poison. So
I see we have a lot of gardeners on here, quite a few gardeners. Do you have anything to add to the weed question or the discussion? Just you can join us. If not, maybe we'll move on to our next speaker and keep your questions online, and we'll have plenty of time at the end. We have Heath Hurst. He's going to talk to us about cover crops and some of the ways that builds soil and helps with weed control. Can you join us, Heath? We can see your PowerPoint, and it has the notes on the side yet. There you go. Good.
All right, there we go. Morning. Can you guys hear me now?
Yes, thank you. Very good.
Yeah, I was having trouble unmuting there. All right, here we go. Yeah, thanks, Art, for that presentation. That was very thorough and informative. Appreciate that. And I'm Heath Hurst with Indiana State Department of Agriculture, and on behalf of them, I'm proud as punch to be here and give you an intro and basics of cover crops. And we'll go through row crop farming as well as vegetable, how they can be beneficial in our vegetable gardens, and even, touch with even the conventional ways we can work with them and with our colleagues in the organic industry as well. So here's just my generic definition I came up with. Cover crop is planted between a commodity or specialty crop for overall soil and ecological benefits. And a few things on here, soil and ecological benefits, and then between as well. So we'll get into later how we can have two different ways, what I mean with between the commodity or specialty crop. Some considerations when you're doing cover crops is the cost, management, your system overall. If you're never dabbled with cover crops, this is going to be a new system in comparison to what you've done traditionally. Do you have access to good references and mentors? You want to ask those people that have had experience with it, you know, what worked and what didn't, what absolutely failed. And you want to come up with some plan Bs and Cs, especially in your organic systems too, because you're kind of in a tight spot when you don't have that herbicide as a tool. And then that all leads to confidence, you know, starting small and slow and building that confidence so you can succeed later on. Benefits, return on investment is a big one there. Keeping the soil where it belongs. Healthier soil, you're going to have healthier plants. They're going to be more resistant to disease and pests. You know, sustainability. So in 100 years, the world's going to be in different hands, and it's important that we have tools in place and methods that can be viable and sustainable long term. Moisture retention is huge. You know, later in spring where we get these or large rain amount, later on in the summer, we might be really reaching for some moisture, and these cover crops can help us retain that in the soil. This slide I really enjoy. This is like all these cover crops and no-till systems, soil health systems, I'll say that are kind of a big hype right now, is just basically imitating natural life cycles or mimicking them, right? So on the left here, we've got teosinte, which is our ancestor to corn, and it's in its natural setting. Let's be out in the prairie or something, grassland. And then over here, we've got our conventional corn as we have it today, brought from early days of teosinte. And then in the middle, we've got interseeded, looks like some brassicas and some grass with it, or some radishes or turnips or whatever. So I think we're given a template when we had, you know, given this earth, and we're just trying to really just mimic it and follow alongside. I think those are kind of like, you know, as you have a prairie setting, those are kind of the instructions on how we should do vegetable and crop production. So we're just trying to mimic that natural life cycle. Some different cover crop species, got them separated here. See, these are some of the popular ones. Brassicas, we got your radish, rapeseed, yellow mustard, and then tillage turnips. Legumes, which provide nitrogen, should be good complement with corn, nitrogen needing plants, you know, wheat and stuff. And then your non-legumes, annual rye, barley, buckwheat, cereal rye, oats, sorghum threw in there. These are all good starter ones or popular ones that are used by many experienced cover crop planters today. So I'm just gonna, some of the heavy hitters we'll touch on. Radishes, it's, you know, good one to start with because it winter kills. You don't have to worry about, you know, am I going to have to apply herbicide in the springtime? Do another pass. Has a rapid fall growth, can capture a lot of the nitrogen and up into the plant instead of running off with the soil. Good soil erosion prevention, alleviate soil compaction. Some of these are called tillage turnips because they go deep and big. Now it's caution, you don't want them getting too big if you're doing, say, corn or something and you're trying to plant in these big cavities where the radish rotted, then that's going to be trouble. But you know, in a vegetable setting or whatnot, the later you plant them, then the less they'll get, less big they'll get. And the above and below ground biomass is pretty awesome. Worms love these things too. Hairy vetch, great nitrogen source. It's a legume, can suppress weeds, can be mowed and crimped in your organic systems. And then a caution, you know, you let these flowers go, which is when you want to crimp after it flowers. But if you let it go to the seed, This is one of those that can be the gift that keeps on giving. Year after year, this could be present in your large scale field and could be a headache. And if you're doing an organic system, great option for crimping. But boy, if it goes to seed, it could potentially be a bear for you down the road, especially if you don't have that chemical option, depending on how large your plot is. Oats, good winter kill. This is a great one to start with. It's cheap, got your biomass, prevents soil erosion, suppresses the weeds. And this is a good starter if you're pretty nervous about going into cover crops and just want to get your feet wet. Maybe start with some oats. Cereal rye, terminated by crimping in organic systems or conventional systems, it doesn't matter. We'll get to later on some crimping pictures on how you can crimp this or plant green right into it if you're doing a conventional system. And a vegetable system, this is great because you crimp this down and then you've got a mulch to plant into. So you can also, if you wanted to, unlike some of your or most of your corn and bean crops now, you cannot, there's patents on those. You can't use that seed to replant your crop next year. But some of these cover crops like cereal rye, you can harvest that seed and use it on a different plot on a following year. It's a large amount of organic matter. You look how tall that is. And beauty of this one, you can plant it later on in the season. If you've had a late harvest or you're just too busy, you can go into October, probably plant this guy. Now you see how tall this is. If I were in vegetable production, I probably wouldn't plant this where I'm doing my early season stuff like onions or lettuce. But this would be ideal for, say if I was going to put plugs of tomatoes in or something. I could crimp this stuff down and get my spacing right and just plant right into that matted down straw mulch that I've crimped down. And I like this picture too because hiding in this guy is it's that hairy vetch in there. So those can both be crimped or mowed. Now something like this would be a real bear to mow. So you'd have to, I don't know if you can even mow this guy, but you could mow at the highest setting and then come back and do another pass on the lowest setting. Buckwheat. This one's known for its ability to scavenge phosphorus. And I've heard of guys planting this, across their field in one strip and then getting aerial imagery later in the following years. And you'll see this bright green strip where they planted buckwheat in the past, kind of like an old fence row. And there's something about this buckwheat that really does something in the soil to boost it and really make it thrive in that area. It's a quick grower. It will winter kill. You can tell by the picture it's great for pollinator. Again, another one after this guy is blooming, you want to be Johnny on the spot and try to get rid of it because you don't want that guy going to seed. And again, you got the gift that keeps on giving. And that situation wouldn't be good if you've got a weedy problem with this buckwheat going on. So some of these are really important to almost experiment with in your garden or on a small scale, just so you can understand and get a handle on it and make sure you got the time to combat some of these guys when the time's appropriate. I know I talked to one producer some years ago, and he said the most he's learned about cover crop for his conventional large-scale farm production was in his vegetable garden. And he got to play with them and really learn and get a feel for what he could handle and what he couldn't handle at what times of the year. And moisture is always going to be different every year. You're not going to have the same year every time, so it can get tricky on managing some of these cover crops. Going on into the application, you do aerial broadcast. Those are actually kind of you could put those in the same room, if you will. And we got drilled, interseed, and then the slurry seed. Here we got a plane just flying on, probably a rye. And the beauty of that is you can do that when the corn or bean is at a later growth stage. Now, if you got irrigation on your field or irrigation with your vegetable setting, you can make it rain. So this wouldn't be a problem. However, if you do fly on this seed and you don't get moisture for quite some time, that's dollars down the sink, because if you don't have any moisture, then it's just not going to take off, and it's not going to have enough light, and the seed's just going to lay on the ground and die. So be mindful of, it's when everyone wants their cover crop flown on, everyone wants it right before the rain. Well, that guy's got a list so long, and that's what he's going to try to do to make his business successful. But can he viably get it all done right before the rain when everyone needs it? Does he have enough pilots? So talk around to your local SWCD offices, local seed dealers, on reputable people that do aerial application. Broadcasting, here on the left, we got a corn harvester head, and he's put his cover crop broadcaster right on the front there. And the idea of that is he's going to have all that residue, that chaff come out the back. And so he's getting his cover crop put on before all that residue gets sprayed on the back. And he's doing one pass, right? So he doesn't have to come in and do another pass, and he gets it on immediately, right before the harvest or at harvest. So the quicker you can get some of these established, the better. You want good growth in the soil, just like nature intended. The plant's roots are constantly in the soil, improving it and making it better. On the right here, we've got a guy that retrofitted his Highboy with, it's like little wide drops, but that's a compressor blows the seed down these tubes, and on the bottom right, you can see it kind of just drops out that PVC and then lays right in the ground in between your corn rows there. So you can get in pretty tall corn, get your seed established well before harvest, and get some moisture there. And then once you harvest, then that cover crop's not going to grow you just want to kind of get going. And then once you harvest, that cover crop's already been growing a little bit, maybe a few inches, and might be kind of winsy. But once you cut that crop off, it's got all this light, and it can just take right off. Slurry seed, so you mix cover crop seed with manure, inject it, or you could even knife it in your manure and have a broadcast on the back of that. Now you want to be careful too. You don't want to burn the seed, but I have heard of people doing this with some degrees of success. And that's, again, talking to your established cover crop folk in your area and saying, hey, what's worked when you're doing this cover crop? What did this burn, or how successful was it? Was it worth it, the pass? I mean, anytime you're doing one, you're going to have to do one pass for something, whether it's harvest or knifing in manure. It's great if you can do, kill the two birds with one stone and get it down with one pass. Drilling. See the most beautiful stands of cover crops with a drill. And part of that's you got good seed to soil contact. And that seed to soil contact, you're just providing good moisture for that seed to take off and thrive. But drilling's a popular one. This guy's going right into his wheat right after harvest, and some good, beautiful stands with drilling. Interseeding. I believe Alan has a implement that can interseed, but you'd go into your corn, E5, E7, basically knee-high stage, and you can interseed, and you can see in between these rows, you'll see 3 tubes coming down, and that's going to 3 different rows they're planting in between this corn row. So it's not just one little piddly like grass cover crop. He's got 3 separate ones he can put in that can really line that up and really thrive after the corn gets harvested. And this is gaining some attraction and getting pretty popular. Wanted to touch on grazing briefly. If you get your cover crop established early enough, and that would be something like if you flew it on and got good moisture when your corn's growing, or you did that interseeding like we just seen, you could really get your cover crop established good enough where you could go in there and graze. Now, it used to be where, we took all the fence rows out, and we just wanted to expand these fields because we've got a lot of people out there and we got to keep them fed. So now we're starting to see guys scratching their head and then like, well, if I could just paddock off a couple areas of that field, or even fence in the whole thing with some temporary fencing, and get maybe my neighbor's livestock out there or mine out there with a water source, and then that's a double bonus there. I can take care of my livestock. I've heard of guys that are just doing their row crop production. That's all they're into. And then there's one of the boys or daughters, it's like, hey, Dad, I'm going to get a lot of cows. You mind growing some cover crop plots on some of those fields after, and then I can take my cows out there. So you kind of joining forces in the family, or you could do a neighbor. And this would be a full circle natural system, right? This would be that full circle like template that we need, mimicking a natural system. Because animals would have been out there, living roots all the time. So the winter kill is great. It's a great place to start, but it'd be great when you evolved in your cover crop system, your new system, to incorporate some that you would have to terminate in the spring, whether it be crimping with your organic option or herbicide in your conventional option, because that natural system would have living roots that are beneficial to what we take for granted underground and that whole ecosystem under there. Termination, herbicide, mowing, and crimping go hand in hand. Old man winter, good one. And then solarization. So herbicides, you got to worry about your residual carryover. That's talking to your seed dealer, talking to your mentors or experienced cover crop specialist in your community. You do not want to plant a cover crop that's not going to handle certain residual carryover from whatever herbicide is part of your system. That could be a lot of dollars down the money or down the drain, be a lot of frustration. And it's not good to buy all this seed and take the time, manpower to go out there and spread this cover crop, and you had residual carryover from the herbicide program, and the cover crop's not doing anything, pretty much just driving around the field. You got a cost, safety aspect, and then your timing. Okay, is it going to be a really wet spring? You've seen that cereal rye that was really tall. Is it going to get so tall that you just start getting nervous, and I got to get out in that field, or your annual rye. Let's see, the rule of thumb with annual rye is to spray it to terminate it after you've mowed your lawn at least twice. So if you haven't mowed your lawn at least twice, you're going to be wasting your money when you go out there and try to spray that annual rye. It's just gonna, it might get sick or something, but it's going to come back. It's going to come back with a vengeance. So timing and patience and really just assessing how, and that's why you start out with these things smaller in a small plot, so you can really figure out this system. I know there's an organic dairy operation up north. I talked to the guy once, and he did the cereal rye, and they're going to crimp it for their organic operation. Well, it was just such a wet spring, and that cereal rye just took way off, and it was too early. They knew they couldn't get it crimped. They knew it wasn't going to die. So they had to, I mean, their back was against the wall. They had to get it planted. They planted the field. And the guy actually, believe it or not, he rented a steel wheel tractor from a neighbor Amishman and drove every row crimping that cereal rye in that field. So it's kind of a crazy option, but he did have a plan B, and he had the time to do it too. So I guess it worked out. Mowing and crimping, great for organic, gives you good mulch. Again, you got your timing issue. What's your plan for what crop you're going to put there? I think carrots have such a fine seed. I'm not sure if I would want to do that. Do it in that strong mulch unless you got a tool to put a good furrow in or something. But mowing, crimping, you can go a little later in the season. And I know vegetable and organic production, the first one that has those melons or whatever crop you're peddling down at the farmer's market, you're number one, and you get the reputation, and you're going to sell out quicker and better. So make sure you're putting picking your cover crop for the right space in your garden, so that it makes it viable for your sales in the selling season. Winter kill, free, organic option, good one to start with. Get some cheap oats, throw them out there and let them die over winter, and you get some biomass out of it, and it's just a good starting point. And then solarization we'll touch on for organic people. This is when you can do a clear or black tarp, but it can take several months. So maybe if you're expanding your garden or something and you're an organic operation, you can take a large tarp or Bisqueen or something and weight it down on the edges, and that will kill off that vegetation after a while. Large scale, that's really tricky to do. For our just hobby garden at home, we've done another technique. We started doing just laying down cardboard and newspaper, and then you get an inch of topsoil will do it. We're probably a little thinner in spaces there too. Throw it on top of all that, and then you can put your plugs in. You can seed even your carrots and fine seed right into it. And within a couple weeks, within the month, that grass is going to be gone. And see, we did that last year, and those were where we did that for the first time. Those were the best tomatoes we've had in years. So here's some crimping examples, not only conventional, but maybe a smaller setting. So on the left, this guy's he's crimping on front and then drilling, his seed in back. So he's doing one pass system, saves on fuel and time. And you always want to plant in the direction that you crimped it. So he's got a good system there, a good setup. You can usually see this crimper in the back. They do a pass and then come back and plant again. The guy on the right here, he has just got a board and 2 ropes on one side, and you just step on it and away you go. Something you got a family operation, you can have younger kids do this or whatnot, but good organic option. Then you got all that biomass, that mulch on there that's going to die on its own, and plant right into it. Here's some resources. Sarah has a wonderful book out, Managing Cover Crop Profitability. And they have a lot of resources on their website. You can get on there, and I believe you can download that book and print it off if you'd like, but everything on there I think is downloadable and free. State land grant extensions, I put Purdue here, but don't forget about our neighbors to the east and north or west. Illinois and Michigan and Ohio have done, great research as well, have great sources. So Purdue's got all kinds of amazing resources, but they even got a little pocket guide, cover crop pocket guide that you can get for a minimal fee. And some of these field days and such, I've seen them just handing those cover crop pocket guides out. No-Till Farmer, they're known for their conference they have annually every year. This year is actually in Indianapolis. It was virtual, but this does come around to Indiana every so many years. And I've heard absolutely nothing but great things about that conference. I've attended it myself and learned quite a bit. Just a plethora of information from that conference, and you get to meet people that are like-minded and learn from them, their mistakes and their ideas. Your local SWCD, Soil Water Conservation District, if the staff there doesn't have the answers, you got a tricky question or something, it's likely they know somebody that can help you out and direct you in the right direction. NRCS, another great service, just like what it represents, very knowledgeable and have a big chest of tools and resources that they can go to if they don't know the answer. And then lastly, we're going to go dabble with the Midwest Cover Crop Councils. They got a little guide to help us select our cover crop selection tool. So I'm going to stop sharing here and then jump back on with this Cover Crop Council tool. Here we go. Alrighty. So as you see here, mccc.msu.edu is a wonderful source for getting your feet wet, or if you're a well-seasoned, experienced guy or gal, to get on here and learn more about cover crops. And they have the selector tool. It's a pretty cool little guy. You can do your row crops or vegetable crop tool. And I'm not sure, can't see the chat here, but didn't know if somebody had something that they wanted me to put in, but we'll start with row crop here. So it's pretty straightforward, very user-friendly. Do Allen, that's where I'm at now. Goal, we'll do weed fighter. Complement our, and you can add several different goals, right? So erosion fighter, all these are good for that. Do corn. I'm gonna do out there. well drained, tiled, no flooding. All right. This will show us all our options here. Do this for any commodity crop, any vegetable setting. And here's your chart. Cereal rye goes the distance, right? If you're a late one, barley. So any of these guys just kind of breaks it down for you and makes it really simple. So frost seeding gives you a little legend here. And that's basically all I've got. I don't know if somebody wants to throw out something they want to do with this, but yeah, I just recommend you getting on this cover crop decision tool and playing around with it and seeing what, planning for this next year after you guys get your harvest done.
Okay, thank you, Heath. The Midwest Cover Crops Council and the No-Tillage Farmer and the Extension offices, we can't speak highly enough of all of them. They're all running at the forefront of these practices. They're changing weekly, monthly sometimes. We're learning new things we can do. So I love that. That's one of the best explanations we ever had, Heath, of the selector tool. I see that we have a lot of knowledge and practical advice and people on here. Let's hear your stories or what you can add to us today. That makes this work so much better. So anybody who wants to unmute, give us a question or give us comments, because that's a great thing to do. Heath, you hit a couple times on cover crops growing in the harvest or in the commercial crop or the gardening, companion crops. Can you add on that? Can you expound on some of the things we can do with that?
Well, you can, there's it's what kind of nutrients your crops or your vegetables that you're growing, and how you can, like you said, your companion crop with it. So if you're doing sweet corn, you might want to do a sweet pea or something in between the rows to help with the nitrogen during the season. Yeah, just there's all kinds of charts and information out there on companion cropping, on what goes well with others. We at our house, we've been just started with the cereal rye. We like a lot because it gives that good mat down, and we can make a little row that we can plant into with even some of the finer stuff if we spread it out and make like a little tillage pass in the middle. But I mean, it's just such a great mulch for a weed suppression, and we really aren't doing too much weeding out there. And it's also keeping the moisture in for late season when it's pretty dry. So, okay, I see another one here. How do you choose type of application method? Well, if you got irrigation and you can make it rain, you can just broadcast. If you're in a vegetable setting, you can do we used to call them a little whirly bird, but like a hand-held broadcaster you could get at any hardware store or Lowe's or Home Depot or something. You can also get something, a cedar broadcaster. It kind of looks like a salt spreader with two wheels and has a nice basket on it. You can fill that up for a bigger area, and you can just walk that, and it's both those whirlybird handheld and the walk behind with two wheels. Those both have settings where you can dial them in to a certain degree on how thick you want it. You can also test it out and your pounds per acre or whatnot. Let's see. Art's chimed in here about white clover is a good companion crop between vegetables and can be mowed to keep it from competing with the crop, but it suppresses weeds and supplies nitrogen to the soil over time as well.
I might want to add a little bit to that one. If you have very dry weather, it might not be a good time to have a good stand of clover growing because it will use nitrogen out of the soil. So irrigation is a good thing, or vary depending on your conditions. This would be a great time. I'd like to step in and tell you about the Allen County Solar Conservation District. We have an interseeder that we've been playing or practicing with now for 4 or 5 years. We can seed cover crops into standing corn. We typically do it at V4 to V7, so ankle to knee high, about the time you're putting side dress nitrogen on. We're planting 2 rows between each row of corn and having some very good success with it. It's the number one concern is what kind of herbicide you have down on that field, because you could just be 5, 6, 7 weeks behind herbicide application. So the herbicides, any residuals will have effect on it. If anybody wants to know more about that, give us a call and we'll work, and we'd love to give you a couple plots, a demonstration plot or field size plants. We can do 6 or 8 rows, so we can match most planter widths by planting in there. Anybody have anything? Give me you want to chime in? I know one of the things interesting I saw was, or I thought of the natural suppressants like the vinegar we talked about earlier. I know there's garlics and there's mustards out here. The mustards are very good at turning into the soil and stopping a lot of weed growth. And anybody have experience with garlic? Because I know that's out there on some of the guys are putting that on also.
I'm sorry, do you mean like a liquid, like a solution, a garlic solution?
Yeah, I've heard of that. Have you had any experience with that?
I know I do have an insecticide I use for house plants that has some garlic in it, but I haven't heard of the herbicide stuff. That's interesting.
Okay. Heath also mentioned mentoring. That's a great thing. Find somebody that you can talk to through the season, before season, over the winter, to that has a little experience with it, or sometimes it's just good to make contact with other people and help figure out what you want to do. The Nature Conservancy at Defiance, Ohio, which covers our area, has a program they started. It's Farmer to Farmer Mentor. So they have trained people. They're going to start more classes to train more to do mentoring, to work with individual farmer on farmer. So if anybody would like that, give the Nature Conservancy a call. They're available on website. Or if you want to become a mentor, they have another class they're working on starting. So that is a paid training, and they have funds in there to pay you for doing the mentoring. So that's a great thing. Hey, Art, I see another question for you. What resource do you have to identify weed species? Can you come on and tell us where we can find things?
Sure. So for weed identification, there's a lot of different resources you can use. I find like Purdue, for instance, publishes these little extension booklets, like crop field guides that have basic weed identification in them. Those are very helpful. They will have like pictures of the leaves as they first come out of the soil for various weed species. They'll also have how to identify the weed later in the growing season. You can always do web searches. There's a lot of keys online of answer various questions about the plant that you're trying to identify, and it'll tell you what it most likely is. There's apps out there you can put in your phone, basically scan a leaf, and it will tell you what plant that is. Those are very helpful. You can always try some of your agency resources, taking a plant to Purdue Extension, taking a plant to your SWCD or NRCS or ISDA office. Somebody's likely to know what it is. So yeah, there's a lot of resources out there. There's plant identification books for Indiana specifically. Those are helpful. There's a Weeds of the Midwest book. There's all kinds of plant identification resources out there that I use sometimes, and that basically anybody that understands a couple plant terms, you should be able to figure out what weed you're dealing with. So those are all very helpful.
Okay, I see we have in the chat room, we have a comment from David Green about an arrow seeder. Can you join us and expand on that a little bit?
David had to step out for a second.
Okay. Anybody familiar with that? Is that the arrow seeder that Heath had shown on the picture there?
If somebody goes to that link, then there's scroll down and there's some neat video images of it. If you could share your screen.
Okay. Heath, you talked about vetch, hairy vetch. I know one of the saying with that is if you let it go to seed, you can deed it with the title to your land. Any experience with any of the other vetches like cahaba or the common vetch?
No, we've just dabbled with the hairy vetch in our garden, but that thing, when I did landscaping for several years, that stuff was a real bear to kind of control when it got into people's beds as well.
Yeah, I've used common and the cahaba vetch, and with a lot more ease of terminating it, and not quite as prolific in growth. Won't give you quite the benefit of the nitrogen, but it will give you a good shot. That was a great picture of the cedar there. That looks like something fun.
I just wanted to offer also that I have a smaller space that I'm working in, and I really have liked using buckwheat both as a cover crop and, as you mentioned, to attract pollinators and beneficial insects. And I'll even incorporate that into areas where I just have wildflowers growing and just kind of let it mix in with those. And I find that when it reseeds itself, at least in my small space, it's not too big of a deal because the roots are fairly shallow. So if I need to terminate it or pull it, it's not too big of a deal.
Great, thank you. I've had buckwheat growing in my corn as a companion crop. It'll stay at about ear height all through the season until it start getting dry, and then it'll fade away. Corn doesn't mind that at all. That's one of the better companion crops. We wouldn't want it to go to seed, or depending on your following crop, maybe it was not going to hurt the following crop. So all considerations. Any other comments? Heath or Art, you want to add anything more, and you want to expound on or expand on anything you have?
No, just thanks for everyone for joining. And Mike Whirling, I will give a plug for him. He's got years of experience, well known in this region. Really nice guy. I remember I was a stranger doing my undergrad, and I approached him for doing some research work out at his field, and learned a lot from him, and got to see some of the cool and amazing things he's been doing out there. He's on top of that bell curve, one of the innovators. That's really a good resource and mentor for. It's also working for this Allen district too, that y'all can reach out to and get some insight and maybe learn from the mistakes and from the lucky guesses that he's got to experience over the years.
Yeah, I would also like to say thank you, Mike. I enjoyed listening to everybody's comments and everything. I guess the last thing I'll say is that, like Heath said, with cover crops, every year is different based on the weather. You're going to see different weeds popping up. You may see some weird ones one year, and the next year may not see it because conditions were just not right for it. The same thing with cover crops. You got to manage them based on the moisture you're getting that year. And with weeds, that's also very important. A wet, rainy year like we had in 2019 is going to produce different weeds in the same field than you may have in a dry year like we had last year. So just keep that in mind. As with anything in agriculture, you're somewhat dependent on the weather. You got to adapt to it.
All right. Thanks, Art and Heath. Thanks, Heath, for your good comments, your nice comments. My farm is open to anyone. Give us a contact here. I love taking people on the farm tour, so you can see what I do right, and sometimes, well, just about every year, something that I did wrong. That's how we learn. Thank everybody for joining us. It's really been great. I want to talk about our next one, the coffee and water quality, May 18th, 8:30 to 10:30 again. We have Bob Gillespie, professor, retired from Purdue Fort Wayne and IPFW when they were together. He's a great resource on our water sampling program and how our actions affect the waters. And Dan Wire is going to be with us. He calls himself a river rat or the river janitor, on and on, because he's been playing on the three rivers in Fort Wayne here since he was young, before it was popular. Now, I'd love to see him talk about what people can do, how you can enjoy the water, and get the whole different new perspective on the city of Fort Wayne. They just got done with their races last weekend that I know were very popular. The weather might have not been the nicest to be out there, but that's really good. So May 18th, join us again. We'll get the same thing coming back. Joelle, have anything else for me?
Yep, I'm in the room with Mike. You can't see me, but you should be able to hear me. Just to go also off this coffee and water quality is that, we all have a part to play in the water that's around us. Each of us lives in a watershed. So your farming practices, or even just outside of your home, are you leaving your dog's droppings out in the yard, and then that's getting into the waterways, or maybe the oil spills out of your car. What are you going to do with that? Or whether you need to keep your field from eroding, or keeping nutrients on your field. We all have a part to play in water quality. And so this is going to be a really awesome opportunity to learn how to do that and walk away with some good action steps. And also how to enjoy the waters around us, like Mike said. Next, I want to talk about our urban and small farms program. So if you are an urban or small farmer, or even a community gardener within the Western Lake Erie Basin, you are eligible for this program. And so a small farmer just has to make less than $250,000 of gross annual income. You can be eligible for some of the things that are available through this program. So currently what we're offering is free soil testing to those who fit in with the program, so the urban small farmers in the WLEB. We're offering them free soil testing, as well as technical assistance. So if you have a question maybe about weeds, or maybe about cover crops, or about a pest or an insect, or what kind of herbicide you want to use, come to us. We are here for free technical assistance. And again, if we don't know the answer, we will find someone who does. So we are excited to be able to share that with you. And if you're interested in this program, my contact information is below. So you can either call the phone number or send an email directly to my email if you're interested in anything with our program. So yes, I want to thank you for joining, and I'll put it back over to Mike.
All right, if no more questions or comments, we'll call it a day. This will be available. Most likely the link will be on our website, the Elm County SWCD's website soon when they get it stuck in there. So thanks again for everyone joining us. Goodbye.